Hello, everybody, and welcome to Tending to Change. I'm your host, Jenny Juarez. So, in the last episode, we talked about the importance of learning how to turn toward our pain so that we can look clearly at our life circumstances and ask ourselves sincerely, am I living in alignment with my authentic self? Am I living my life in a way that is moving me in the direction that I want to be going? And learning how to discern what is life affirming and what is life diminishing is very important because part of our spiritual journey involves this continuous evaluation of the way that we're living our life and learning how to take personal responsibility for our attitudes, our behaviors, and our actions. Now, this practice of self observation might be a little bit of a foreign practice for many of us because it requires us to look at our lives from a bit of a distance. It requires us to kind of separate ourselves a bit from being the main character of our life story. And there's actually a term for this. It's called the witness self or the witness perspective. So, the witness perspective is a different level of consciousness from ego consciousness, which sees everything in a subject object relationship where the subject is me, or pure consciousness, which is just a free awareness untethered by thoughts or emotions. It just is pure beingness. The witness is just observing. It doesn't judge things as good or bad, right or wrong. It just observes life as it's happening without assigning any labels to it. So it's from this level of consciousness, which I've referred to it as like taking the perspective of slightly above and slightly behind the head so that you're including yourself in the story. And when you're watching yourself as one of infinite characters in the story of life, then you can observe yourself with a little bit of detachment. And the reason why this is so valuable is from that space, we're not stuck in our storyline, which again is more of an ego driven perspective. So, what do I mean by not being stuck in our storyline? Okay, here's an example. As I've mentioned before, I am a mother to 4 children, and I stay home with my 1 and 4-year-old during the day while my husband goes to work. And most of the time, I love this. It's actually such a gift for me to be able to be home with my kids because it's not something I got to experience when my daughters were little, but it's a lot of work. And so it's common for me to get in my head with my ego carrying on this narrative that I'm just so tired. I need a break. I've been home with the kids all day, and Paulo doesn't understand how hard it is to take care of and entertain and nurture these children for the whole time he's gone at work. Of course, he does, but in that moment, my ego is convincing me that my life is so hard and nobody understands me. So then, if Paulo comes home and sits down to rest, I might take it personally and create this whole story in my head about how he doesn't appreciate me, he doesn't want to help me, and I'm a total victim. And now I'm offended and I'm angry. So now I'm going to start an argument about it. And so, again, this is that victim mentality of life is happening to me, life is against me. Now, if I were able to be living in that argument that's happening in real time, but also be maintaining the witness perspective, then there's a part of my conscious awareness that's also just observing the situation and acknowledging it for what it is. So the witness might notice things like, wow, Jenny is feeling really tired and overwhelmed. She has needs that aren't being met. And because the witness consciousness is just witnessing, it would also be capable of noticing Paula's experience from the outside and saying something like, Jenny's taking this very personally. She's not taking into consideration that Paulo worked a long day and he does appreciate what she does and he does want to support her. He just might need a break for a moment too. The witness is able to take in the totality of the situation and see it clearly without that emotional charge attached to it. It can notice the emotions and the thoughts and the sensations without making valuations and judgments. So, this capacity for living life on more than one level of consciousness, meaning in this example, ego consciousness and witness consciousness, that's living on two levels of awareness at the same time. And this is what gives us the ability to have that discernment, to be able to view reality with clarity and without the emotional charge and taking things personally. So we can be very pragmatic and say, is this serving life or is this not serving life? Is this helping the situation or is it harming the situation? Is this taking me in the direction that I want to go in or is it not? We can become curious about what's going on inside and outside of us instead of leaping to conclusions and casting judgments. But this is a slow process. And we start with things like checking in with the breath and noticing the body, like the body scan we did last week. When we can turn our attention from looking outward all the time and also look inward, then we can cultivate this witness perspective, this noticing, this neutral observer. And I just want to be really clear that each of us has our own unique path. For example, just because I have decided that horror movies and true crime and violent music aren't my thing anymore, does not mean that I'm saying that this is the best way to live or the right way to live or the way that everyone else should do it. I would not say that because discernment is not dogma, it's fluid. Because while a particular action might seem inappropriate in one context, it might be entirely appropriate in another. And each of us needs to learn this process of checking in with ourselves and discerning the right way forward. I'm not ever going to declare that we should all live the same way. All I invite is for you to consider what is supporting you and the world around you and what is not. And let me just emphasize that distinction that I said it's about what is supporting you and the world around you. Because if we are always just looking out for ourselves and not taking into consideration the effect we have on other people, we can have a tendency of falling into self serving behaviors that might be causing harm to the environment or to other people or our families without us realizing it. So it's just a really beneficial practice to take into consideration, does this support me and the world around me? I would also like to take a moment to acknowledge how difficult making these changes can be. It's one thing to notice that something isn't serving you. It's another thing entirely to overwrite habits around it. So I'd like to shift the conversation a little bit toward what that looks like and give an example of my own personal experience. So, as I've mentioned before, I used to struggle with alcohol addiction. Now, I've had people question me when I share that I suffered from alcoholism, and they wonder how serious it was considering how I present to them now. They look at me with those eyes like, okay, but were you an alcoholic? Yes, I was. I started drinking consistently my freshman year of high school, so about 14 years old. The environment that I was raised in, both my parents were drinkers, and so were all their friends. It was very normalized for me from a very young age that any kind of celebration or home project or vacation or social gathering or holiday, all of it included alcohol. It was something that was always in the house and it was a staple for the weekend. And because it was so embedded in my environment, I never questioned it. Drinking alcohol was just something that adults did. It wasn't until during a particularly rough time in my relationship to my parents that I chose to live with my best friend for a couple months over the holidays during my sophomore year of high school. And I distinctly remember noticing how her parents not only didn't drink with dinner or on the weekends, but there was no liquor cabinet and there was no beer in the fridge just in case either. My first thought was, her parents don't drink? That's weird. But my second thought was, or is it weird to drink? That was the beginning of the interruption of my autopilot around alcohol. Unfortunately, while that experience definitely planted valuable seeds for a future becoming, it wouldn't be enough to get me to stop at that moment. Alcohol became a very familiar coping strategy for me. And so throughout the rest of high school, I went to a lot of parties on the weekends. I mean, at one point, I was drinking a fifth of liquor every 2 or 3 days. It was to the point where I was having my buyer purchase 2 bottles just so that I wouldn't have to bug them so often. And as I became a legal drinking adult, it was just fully embedded in my lifestyle. I was a very high functioning alcoholic for about 20 years. I maintained straight A's in school. I took honors classes. I held a full time job. And so, unless you were spending time with me, this wasn't necessarily something that you knew about. But one night, when I was about 32 years old, after a long night of drinking, I wrote in my journal, "Dear alcohol, we're breaking up. I'm done. It's not worth the loss of control." Now, I'd love to say that that was the end of my addiction and everything magically fell into place, but I would be lying. It was about a 6 year process of efforting and backsliding before I lost the strong desire to drink. And there were several authors and teachers who supported my process along the way. Ones that come to mind are Melissa Urban, creator of the Whole30 program. And even though her Whole30 program is around eating a whole foods based diet, she has a history of drug addiction. And that is part of what actually led her to creating the program in the first place. So, in some interviews with her, she would talk about her process of overcoming drug addiction. Annie Grace, author of This Naked Mind and creator of the Alcohol Experiment, was another great mentor and teacher. In the Alcohol Experiment, I received daily emails for 30 days with scientific information about alcohol addiction, and it gave me a very practical understanding. And I also remember reading a book called Natural Rest for Addiction by Scott Kiloby, and this introduced more of a mindfulness aspect. Now, I have been asked by many people over the years what it takes to let go of an addiction like alcoholism. And it's always with deep compassion that I confide to them that they must be willing to change their entire lives. Where you go and what you do for fun will definitely change. Your friends will probably change. Your routes that you drive might change. I mean, so many routes that I would take would bring me past my local liquor store that I would frequent. The music you listen to and the shows or movies you watch might change. Some music artists or songs that I would listen to would instantly put me in the mood to drink. It's what they would be talking about, it's what I would associate my memories with. Even how you dress might change. And so, as I said, it was about a 6 year process of efforting and then backsliding before this strong desire to drink finally fell away. And a big part of that success was when I incorporated mindfulness into the process. It's something that I learned from a podcast interview with Dr. Judson Brewer, who is a psychiatrist, a neuroscientist, and the author of many books, including The Craving Mind. I believe it was on the 10% Happier podcast with Dan Harris, where he encouraged people to use mindfulness to observe themselves before drinking, during drinking, and after drinking. And it was once I became very curious about my triggers and how I felt during and after that it became a little easier to say no. So, in practice, this would look like you're coming home from work and your habit is to pour yourself a glass of wine. And instead of immediately pouring the glass of wine, you check in with your body, with your thoughts, with your emotions, and you ask yourself, why am I pouring myself this glass of wine? Like, what about the situation is making me want to drink right now? And if you still want to have a drink, then have one. And as you take your first sip, notice how you feel. What thoughts are coming up? What emotions? After you finish that glass, check in again. And if you decide to have another glass, ask yourself, why? How am I feeling? And drink however much you're going to drink. but noticing throughout the process of drinking, checking in with yourself periodically to see how you're feeling. And most importantly, checking in the next morning after drinking. How do I feel now? What's my experience in my body and in my mind and my emotions, my motivation, my energy level? So it was this slow process of observing myself in the act of drinking, after drinking, that helped me discern this is not serving me. This is not taking me in the direction that I want to go. This is not life enhancing. Now, Judson says that a common definition of addiction is continued use despite adverse consequences. So, continued use despite adverse consequences implies a lack of mindful awareness. And it's not limited to drugs, cigarettes, and alcohol. You could be addicted to food, work, sex, exercise, social media, gaming, shopping, even the news and politics. Anything that you continue to use despite adverse consequences to your physical health, to your mental health, using your time in a way that you don't want to be, harming your relationships, but you keep doing it, that's a sign of an addiction. And addiction follows this feedback loop of trigger, behavior, and reward. The behavior is the addictive pattern, and the reward is the dopamine hit or the pleasurable feelings that we get from the behavior. Now, the trigger can be anything. In fact, I once wrote in my journal my own chart for my drinking habit. And as it turns out, literally anything can be used for a trigger for drinking. I'm having a bad day, so I'm going to have a drink. I'm having a good day, so I'm going to have a drink. I just got out of work. I'm on vacation. It's the weekend. I'm golfing. I'm bowling. I'm at the beach. I'm going to dinner. We're going to go out dancing. I'm hanging out with my friends. I'm hanging out alone. I mean, it's interesting to me that drinking is the only addiction that people only question you when you stop. So in my little chart, I wrote my whole list of triggers for drinking, which there were many, and the behavior was the drinking, and the rewards were interesting. It was things like social connection, relaxation, a quiet mind, feeling more relaxed and comfortable. So then I started asking myself, what are some alternative behaviors that I could substitute and still receive the same rewards? And I came up with things like meeting up with friends, talking on the phone, taking a nap, exercise, nourishment, taking time in nature, playing, creative expression like writing or drawing, even breath practices, yoga. These things would bring me social connection, relaxation, a calm, quiet mind without the harmful behavior of binge drinking. And what I've learned through reading about habits is that when we lay down a neural pathway and then reinforce it over and over, that's what becomes a habit, something that's done on autopilot, like we've mentioned before. But we can't just rip away that old habit. We need to establish a new routine using the same trigger and reward, but switching out the behavior as I'd mentioned, and then reinforce that pathway over and over until it becomes stronger than the old habit and becomes the new default automatic behavior. So I can say with confidence at this moment that the allure of binge drinking is totally gone. I have no interest to get blackout drunk or even a little drunk. It's not even a possibility for me. But maybe 3 or 4 times a year, I'll have one drink or one glass of wine during a special occasion, but that's it. I may or may not even finish that one drink, but I'm definitely not going back for a second, third, or fourth. It just doesn't appeal to me anymore. I start to get a headache, then my brain feels foggy, and I don't like how it obscures my consciousness. And like I wrote down all those years ago, it's just not worth the loss of control. Still, during periods of extreme stress or emotional discomfort, I can feel this subtle tug of the desire to drink, especially around the holidays with all the emotional memories associated with them. I might pause and glance down the liquor aisle, but then I walk past it because my discernment tells me that I know what's in my best interest and I have the mindful presence and the inner strength to say no. You see, practices such as yoga, mindfulness, meditation, they're a gift that we give ourselves. Our first task is simply to notice. We notice our breath, the sensations in our body, the thoughts that arise in our mind, the emotions that we feel. We learn to turn our awareness inward and to be a neutral observer, to be curious without being critical. We learn to befriend our body and our mind and our emotions, and we slowly learn how to witness them with great love and compassion. And as we do so, we immerse ourselves in this vast ocean of inner wisdom, and we cultivate a resourcefulness that allows us to attend to any dis-ease we may be experiencing with clarity and kindness. The practice invites us to be curious, to notice our inner landscape, and to ask the question, what is needed for balance? We are not helpless. There is boundless strength and wisdom within each of us, waiting to be awakened. So let's finish today's episode with a meditation that I first learned while participating in an 8-week mindfulness based stress reduction program through the Grand Rapids Center for Mindfulness. This mountain meditation is originally adapted from Dr. Jon Kabat-Zinn, who is a professor, prolific author, and creator of the MBSR program. So, taking a comfortable seat, either on the floor or in a chair, begin by sensing into the support you have from the chair or the cushion, paying attention to the actual sensations of contact. Finding a position of stability and poise, with your upper body balanced over your hips and shoulders in a comfortable but alert posture, with your hands in your lap or resting on your knees, your arms hanging by their own weight, stable and relaxed. Sensing into your body, feeling your feet, legs, hips, lower and upper body, arms, shoulders, neck, head. And when you're ready, allowing your eyes to gently close, bringing awareness to the breath, feeling each breath as it comes in and goes out. Letting the breath just be as it is, without trying to change or regulate it in any way. Allowing it to flow easily and naturally with its own rhythm and pace. Knowing you are breathing perfectly well right now. There's nothing for you to do. Allowing the body to be still and sitting with a sense of dignity, a sense of resolve, a sense of being complete and whole in this very moment, with your posture reflecting this sense of wholeness. As you sit here, letting an image form in your mind's eye of the most magnificent or beautiful mountain you have ever seen or can imagine. Letting it gradually come into greater focus. And even if it doesn't come in as a visual image, allowing the sense of this mountain and feeling its overall shape, its lofty peak high in the sky, the large base rooted in the bedrock of the earth's crust, its steep or gently sloping sides. Noticing how massive it is, how solid, how unmoving, how beautiful, whether from afar or up close. Perhaps your mountain has snow blanketing its top and trees reaching down to the base, or rugged granite sides. There may be streams and waterfalls cascading down the slopes. There may be one peak or a series of peaks, or with meadows and high lakes. Just observing it, noticing its qualities. And when you feel ready, seeing if you can bring the mountain into your own body, sitting here, so that your body and the mountain in your mind's eye becomes one. So that as you sit here, you share in the massiveness and the stillness and the majesty of the mountain. You become the mountain. Grounded in the sitting posture, your head becomes the lofty peak, supported by the rest of the body and affording an exquisite panoramic view. Your shoulders and arms become the sloping sides of the mountain. Your butt and legs become the solid base, rooted to your cushion or your chair, experiencing in your body a sense of uplift from deep within your pelvis and spine. With each breath, as you continue sitting, becoming a little more like this breathing mountain, alive and vital, yet unwavering in your inner stillness, completely what you are, beyond words and thought, a centered, grounded, unmoving presence. As you sit here, becoming aware of the fact that as the sun travels across the sky, the light and shadows and colors are changing virtually moment by moment in the mountain stillness. And the surface teems with life and activity. Streams, melting snow, waterfalls, plants, and wildlife. As the mountain sits, seeing and feeling how night follows day and day follows night. The bright warming sun, followed by the cool night sky studded with stars, and the gradual dawning of a new day. Through it all, the mountain just sits, experiencing change in each moment, constantly changing, yet always just being itself. It remains still as the seasons flow into one another, and as the weather changes moment by moment, day by day, calmness abiding all change. In summer, there is no snow on the mountain, except perhaps for the very peaks or in crags shielded from direct sunlight. In the fall, the mountain may wear a coat of brilliant fire colors. In winter, a blanket of snow and ice. In any season, it may find itself at times enshrouded in clouds or fog or pelted by freezing rain. People may come to see the mountain and comment on how beautiful it is, or how it's not a good day to see the mountain, that it's too cloudy or rainy or foggy or dark. None of this matters to the mountain, which remains at all times its essential self. Clouds may come and clouds may go. Tourists may like it or not. The mountain's magnificence and beauty are not changed one bit by whether people see it or not, seen or unseen, in sun or clouds, broiling or frigid, day or night. It just sits, being itself. At times visited by violent storms, buffeted by snow and rain and winds of unthinkable magnitude. Through it all, the mountain sits. Spring comes, trees leaf out, flowers bloom in the high meadows and slopes. Birds sing in the trees once again. Streams overflow with the water of melting snow. Through it all, the mountain continues to sit, unmoved by the weather, by what happens on its surface, by the world of appearances, remaining its essential self through the seasons, the changing weather, the activity ebbing and flowing on its surface. In the same way, as we sit in meditation, we can learn to experience the mountain. We can embody the same central, unwavering stillness and groundedness in the face of everything that changes in our own lives over seconds, over hours, over years. In our lives and in our meditation practice, we experience constantly the changing nature of mind and body and of the outer world. We have our own periods of lightness and darkness, activity and inactivity, our moments of color and our moments of dullness. It's true that we experience storms of varying intensity and violence in the outer world and in our own minds and bodies, buffeted by high winds, by cold and rain, periods of darkness and pain, as well as the moments of joy and uplift. Even our appearance changes constantly, experiencing a weather of its own. By becoming the mountain in our meditation practice, we can connect with its strength and stability and adopt them for our own. We can use its energies to support our energy, to encounter each moment with mindfulness and equanimity and clarity. It may help us to see that our thoughts and feelings, our preoccupations, our emotional storms and crises, even the things that happen to us, are very much like the weather on the mountain. We tend to take it all personally, but its strongest characteristic is impersonal. The weather of our own lives is not to be ignored or denied. It is to be encountered, honored, felt, known for what it is, and held in awareness. And in holding it in this way, we come to know a deeper silence and stillness and wisdom. Mountains have this to teach us and much more if we can let it in. So if you find you resonate in some way with the strength and stability of the mountain in your sitting, it may be helpful to use it from time to time in your meditation practice to remind you of what it means to sit mindfully with resolve and with wakefulness in true stillness. So for just a few more moments, continuing to sustain the mountain meditation on your own in silence, moment by moment, until I call us back. And as you're ready, gently lifting the gaze, opening the eyes. Thank you so much for joining me today I'm loving these conversations with you and exploring this terrain. It's both humbling and deeply gratifying to share my personal life experiences for the benefit of others. And I truly hope that some benefit is coming to you through these conversations. As I've said before, take what is useful and discard the rest. I'm wishing you a wonderful rest of your day, and we'll talk again soon.